What happens when power meets obsession? When a man who's built an empire decides that love is just another thing to own. This is the story of Richard Thornton, a technology magnate from Seattle, Washington, who had everything money could buy. But the one thing he wanted most would lead him down a path of destruction so complete, it would cost him his freedom, his reputation, and very nearly the life of an innocent young woman. Before we begin, if you're drawn to stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature, subscribe to Crime Canvas. We bring you real cases that show how ordinary people can make extraordinary choices, both good and terrible. This is a story about control, about what happens when someone refuses to let go, and about a young woman's fight for survival against a man who believed he owned her future. Richard Thornton wasn't born into wealth. His parents ran a modest hardware shop in Lincoln, Nebraska, and from childhood, Richard learned the rhythms of small business. The customer conversations, the inventory management, the slim profit margins. But Richard wanted more than a shop on Main Street. He wanted to build something that would echo through the technology industry. At 25, fresh from university with a computer science degree, Richard launched a cybersecurity company. The market seemed crowded, but Richard saw gaps others missed. His software became essential. His company grew. Over 3 decades, he built not just one successful venture, but a constellation of them. Richard's approach to business was direct, some would say aggressive. He acquired smaller companies, often with offers that seemed generous until you looked closer. His employees respected him. Many also feared him. Excellence wasn't encouraged in his companies. It was demanded. As his wealth accumulated, Richard's tastes evolved. Rare technology prototypes, high-performance vehicles, a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, a mountain retreat outside the city. The luxuries piled up, each one more exclusive than the last. But personal relationships proved more complicated than business deals. His first marriage to Julia ended after 10 years. She spoke openly about Richard's inability to separate work from life, his emotional distance, the way he treated their marriage like a merger to be managed rather than a partnership to nurture. His second marriage lasted barely 2 years before ending in an expensive divorce. After these failures, Richard made a calculated decision. No more marriages, no more complications. Instead, he sought arrangements that felt more like contracts. Relationships with clear terms, where he maintained control. As Richard approached 60, surrounded by success, but isolated in his achievement, he found himself wanting something he couldn't quite name. A connection, perhaps, or maybe just the illusion of one. That's when he met Sophia Bennett. Sophia Bennett grew up 3,000 miles from Seattle, in a small coastal town in Maine called Rockport. Her mother worked as a receptionist, raising Sophia alone while moving through a series of relationships that seemed to leave her a little more worn down each time. Money was always tight, but Sophia had gifts that transcended their circumstances. She excelled in school, not just academically but socially. She organized art shows and community events. Teachers saw potential in her, encouraging her to think beyond the limitations of their small town. But encouragement doesn't pay tuition, and as graduation approached, the harsh mathematics of their situation became clear. No college fund, no savings, no pathway forward that didn't involve staying exactly where she was. At 19, with a backpack and $700 saved from her job at a local cafe, Sophia boarded a bus to Seattle. She carried dreams of becoming a graphic designer and event coordinator. She imagined a portfolio that would open doors, a career built on creativity and hard work. Seattle taught her different lessons. The city was full of talented people with identical dreams, all competing for the same scarce opportunities. Sophia found herself waiting tables, just like her mother had. The apartment she shared with 2 roommates was cramped and expensive. Her savings dwindled faster than she'd imagined possible. Months passed. Interviews led nowhere. Her portfolio, which had seemed so impressive in Rockport, felt amateurish in a city of professionals. The prospect of returning home, defeated, loomed larger each week. Then came an encounter that would alter everything. At the upscale restaurant where Sophia worked, she served a table of women who radiated confidence and prosperity. Their clothes were designer. Their jewelry caught the light. Their conversation, which Sophia couldn't help overhearing, was about trips to Paris, about gifts from men they called benefactors, about a lifestyle that seemed impossibly glamorous. During a break, Sophia approached one of the women. Her name was Claire, and she was surprisingly direct about her life. She explained the world of exclusive arrangements between younger women and established men. Companionship in exchange for financial support. Mentorship in exchange for affection. Sophia's first reaction was resistance. It felt too close to dependence, too much like the unstable relationships her mother had endured. But Claire's life looked nothing like that. She had her own apartment, her own money, her own choices. Or so it seemed. With Claire's guidance, Sophia created a profile on an exclusive platform. She selected her best photographs, wrote a description that highlighted her ambitions, and waited. The responses came quickly. Among them was an invitation from Richard Thornton to attend a technology conference gala. Sophia accepted. She had no idea that this single decision would nearly cost her everything. The hotel ballroom was magnificent that evening, filled with Seattle's elite. Sophia arrived wearing a borrowed gown, feeling simultaneously excited and out of place. When she spotted Richard approaching, distinguished and confident, something in his manner immediately put her at ease. He was attentive in ways Sophia hadn't experienced before. He asked about her dreams, listened to her ideas about event planning and design. When she described wanting to start her own business, his interest seemed genuine. By the end of the evening, Richard had made an impression. He had connections, resources, knowledge, and he seemed willing to share all of it. Their relationship accelerated quickly. Within a week, Richard presented Sophia with keys to a downtown apartment. The space was beautiful, flooded with natural light, in a neighborhood she could never have afforded on her own. The gesture was framed as practical support for her career ambitions. Then came the wardrobe, the car, the credit card for emergencies. Each gift felt generous in the moment, but each one also added weight to an invisible ledger that Sophia didn't yet understand she was signing. Richard introduced her to influential people in the design and technology sectors. He enrolled her in training programs at prestigious academies. He took her to Nantucket, where they stayed at a historic inn overlooking the ocean. He gave her a necklace, fastening it around her neck himself. "This symbolizes our connection," he told her. "I hope you'll always treasure it." In Aspen, they stayed at a mountain lodge where the views seemed endless. Richard shared stories from his career, pulling Sophia into his world of strategy and ambition. She felt herself transforming from the uncertain young woman who'd arrived from Maine into someone polished and sophisticated. Richard introduced her to colleagues as "my Sophia," a phrase that made her feel special even as something about the possessiveness in it gave her pause. For Sophia, the attention was intoxicating. She began to depend on Richard, not just financially, but emotionally. His approval became something she sought. His disapproval became something she feared. When she successfully coordinated her first major event, Richard was the first person she called, hungry for his praise. Richard, for his part, felt rejuvenated. Sophia's energy, her youth, her ambition, all of it made him feel vital in ways he hadn't experienced in years. He rearranged his schedule to spend more time with her, canceling important meetings for spontaneous afternoons together. Their physical relationship developed with a mixture of hesitation and intensity. Despite their age difference, the connection between them was undeniable. Richard took pride in his attention to Sophia, showering her with care. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect arrangement, tensions were building. Sophia, grateful for everything Richard provided, sometimes felt suffocated by his constant demands on her time. Richard, despite his apparent generosity, harbored a growing fear that Sophia might leave him for someone younger. Neither recognized how fragile their arrangement actually was. As summer gave way to autumn, subtle changes appeared in the relationship. The initial excitement faded into something more routine. For Sophia, a feeling of restlessness began to grow. Despite Richard's extensive network, her career wasn't advancing as she'd hoped. The events she coordinated led to more work, but nothing substantial enough to make her truly independent. She started wondering if her association with Richard was actually holding her back. Whispers of being a kept woman circulated in professional circles. One October morning, Sophia decided to have breakfast at a trendy cafe downtown. At the next table, a young man struck up a conversation. His name was Daniel Foster, a 26-year-old photographer. His passion for his craft and his genuine, uncomplicated manner drew Sophia in immediately. For the first time in months, she felt seen as a person rather than as a project or possession. When Daniel asked for her number, Sophia hesitated only briefly. She told herself it was just networking, professional connection. But deep down, she knew she was testing boundaries she'd agreed to respect. Over the following weeks, Sophia found herself messaging Daniel frequently. Coffee meetings turned into dinners. Each encounter was supposed to be just friendly, but the line kept shifting. Richard noticed a change in Sophia immediately. He saw her distraction, the way she guarded her phone, the vague answers about where she'd been. His past experiences had taught him to recognize when loyalty was wavering. One evening at his penthouse, he confronted her directly. "Who is he?" Richard's voice was controlled, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Sophia fumbled for words, caught off guard. But Richard pressed forward, his tone hardening. "Don't lie to me, Sophia. I can see you've changed. Remember everything I've given you, everything I've done." The argument that followed was fierce. Sophia accused Richard of treating her like property. Richard, his composure cracking, reminded her of where she'd come from, suggesting she'd be nothing without his support. The words hung between them like poison. After that night, an uneasy truce settled over their relationship. Richard intensified his efforts to keep Sophia close. More gifts, more surprises, more trips. But Sophia felt increasingly trapped. The luxury that had once excited her now felt like an expensive cage. After a particularly heated argument, Sophia made a choice. She called Daniel. His voice, warm and non-judgmental, contrasted sharply with the turmoil she'd been experiencing. She told him everything: the arrangement with Richard, her growing unhappiness, her fears about leaving. Daniel listened, then made an offer that would change everything. "Leave him. Come stay with me. We'll figure everything out together." As Sophia ended the call, she felt both terrified and liberated. She knew what she had to do. She had no idea what that decision would unleash. The day Sophia decided to leave began with brilliant sunshine, a stark contrast to what was about to unfold. She'd spent the night carefully packing a single bag, selecting only items she'd owned before meeting Richard. The designer clothes, the jewelry, the expensive accessories, she left all of it behind. Her hands shook as she wrote a note explaining her decision, tears blurring the words. Sophia's plan was to leave while Richard was away, avoiding a confrontation she wasn't sure she could handle. But as she approached the apartment door, it swung open. Richard stood there, and the look on his face told Sophia everything. He'd anticipated this. He'd had her followed. The argument that erupted was unlike anything that had come before. Richard cycled between rage and pleading. He accused her of using him. He begged her to stay. He promised to change, to give her more independence, to support her career without conditions. When his pleas failed, he shifted to threats. "You'll never succeed in this industry without me. I'll make sure of that." Sophia, summoning courage she didn't know she possessed, stood her ground. She told him about Daniel, about wanting a normal life with someone her own age, about needing to find love built on equality rather than exchange. With each revelation, she watched Richard's face contort with fury, his hands clenched into fists. In a final desperate attempt to stop her, Richard grabbed Sophia's arm, his grip painful. "You're making a terrible mistake. You're nothing without me. No one will ever care for you the way I do." For a moment, Sophia faltered. Fear of the unknown, of giving up everything she'd gained, nearly overwhelmed her. But then she thought of Daniel, of the possibility of a future she controlled herself. She pulled her arm free. "Goodbye, Richard." She walked past him and out the door. As it closed behind her, Sophia couldn't see the transformation in Richard's expression. The hurt and anger faded, replaced by something cold and calculating. In that moment, watching the woman he believed he loved walk away, Richard Thornton made a dark decision. If he couldn't have Sophia, then no one would. In the days following Sophia's departure, Richard's penthouse became a place of isolation and darkness. He canceled appointments, ignored calls, drank whiskey, and replayed memories of Sophia until they twisted into something bitter and hateful. The image of her with Daniel haunted him. Her laughter, which had once brought him joy, now felt like mockery. As the initial shock wore off, Richard's emotions shifted from self-pity to something far more dangerous. He'd built his entire life through calculated decisions and strategic moves. He wasn't going to let a young woman and her new relationship undo him. Richard began planning with chilling precision. He understood that he couldn't be directly involved. The risk was too great. He needed someone expendable, someone professional who could handle the situation without leaving any connection back to him. Through careful inquiries in the darker corners of his network, Richard made contact with a man known only as Nathan Cross. Cross was a former military operative turned fixer, respected in certain circles for his meticulous approach and absolute discretion. They met in the basement of a vacant building Richard owned on the outskirts of Seattle. Cross, a solid man with an emotionless demeanor, listened without reaction as Richard outlined his requirements. "It has to look like an accident. No connection to me whatsoever." Over the next week, Richard provided Cross with detailed information about Sophia's routines, her new address, her daily patterns. He'd hired a private investigator to track her movements, and now that surveillance would serve a fatal purpose. Timing was everything. Richard wanted quick action, but Cross counseled patience. Rushing could lead to mistakes, to traces left behind. They needed the perfect opportunity when Sophia would be alone and vulnerable. That opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. Through his sources, Richard learned that Sophia had secured a major client meeting in a remote area of rural Washington. She'd be driving there alone on winding country roads, late in the evening after a long day. When Richard relayed this information to Cross, the fixer nodded grimly. As Cross left to finalize his preparations, Richard poured himself another drink and stared out over the Seattle skyline. He thought of Sophia, her smile, her dreams, her decision to leave. For a brief moment, his resolve wavered. Could he actually go through with this? But then he pictured her with Daniel, young and hopeful, building a future without him. His hand clenched the glass until it shattered, shards cutting into his skin. He barely registered the pain or the blood. His decision was final. Sophia Bennett had to be eliminated. October 20th brought a crisp chill to Seattle, fog rolling through the streets like a shroud. For Sophia, the day was filled with nervous excitement. She just completed a successful planning session for a major event, and the client had hinted at giving her the lead role for their upcoming high-profile conferences. As she left the meeting, her instinct was to call Richard and share her success. Old patterns die hard, but instead, she called Daniel, whose genuine excitement lifted her spirits. "Daniel, I wish you could come with me tonight," Sophia said as she got in her car. But Daniel had a critical deadline on a documentary project and couldn't join her for the client meeting in the countryside. "Drive safe. Call me when you get there." As Sophia navigated the rural roads, darkness and mist closing in around her, unease crept through her chest. She attributed it to nerves about the meeting and lingering worry that Richard might try to sabotage her growing career. To calm herself, she turned up the radio and sang along. Nathan Cross was already in position, waiting strategically along the route. He'd surveyed the area thoroughly, identifying the perfect location. A narrow stretch with a sharp turn and minimal lighting. All that was needed was precise timing. Cross sat in a nondescript black SUV, engine idling, eyes fixed on the road with predatory focus. When he spotted Sophia's sedan approaching, he slowly pulled out, positioning himself behind her. In her vehicle, Sophia noticed the SUV in her rearview mirror. A shiver of fear ran through her as she realized her vulnerability on this isolated road. She pressed the accelerator, trying to increase the distance. Cross kept pace effortlessly, closing the gap. As they approached the critical curve, he executed his plan, accelerating sharply and striking the rear of Sophia's sedan. The vehicle fishtailed, tires screaming as Sophia fought for control. For a moment, it seemed she might recover, but then her sedan careened off the road, crashing through brush before slamming into a tree. The world spun violently as the car crumpled, metal twisting, glass shattering. When it finally came to rest against the trunk, everything went eerily silent. Cross parked briefly to observe the wreckage from a distance. Convinced that survival was impossible, he pulled out a burner phone. Done. Then he tossed the phone into the nearby woods and drove away. But fate had other plans. As Cross left, certain of his success, he failed to notice the faint signs of life in the twisted metal. Sophia, severely injured but conscious, was alive. Through a fog of pain and confusion, she managed to extract herself from the mangled vehicle. With her phone destroyed, she had no way to call for help. Operating on pure survival instinct, she began to crawl, each movement agony, seeking help in the darkness. As dawn broke over Seattle, a hiker made a shocking discovery. The severely injured body of Sophia Bennett, barely alive, hidden in brush beside a remote rural road. This grim finding triggered an investigation that would gradually expose the truth behind her accident and reveal the dangerous obsession of one of Seattle's most powerful men. Detective Lauren Hayes arrived at the scene just as morning mist was lifting. A rising investigator in the Seattle Police Department, Hayes was known for sharp instincts and relentless commitment to finding truth. As she examined the crash site, certain details struck her as too precise for a simple accident. The skid marks on the road, the pattern of broken branches. It all seemed too calculated. Her suspicions intensified when she learned the victim's identity. Sophia Bennett, miraculously clinging to life but in critical condition, was known in local circles for her relationship with Richard Thornton. Hayes sensed there was much more to this situation than a traffic accident. Her first stop was the hospital. Though Sophia was in a medically induced coma, the medical team provided crucial insights. The nature of her injuries didn't align with a typical accident. There were defensive wounds on her arms, suggesting a struggle after the initial impact. Hayes next interviewed Daniel Foster, the last person known to have contacted Sophia. The distraught photographer blamed himself for not accompanying her. He shared Sophia's fears about Richard, particularly her worry that he might undermine her career after their separation. Armed with this information, Hayes approached Richard Thornton. The technology executive maintained a composed exterior, showing appropriate shock and sorrow. But Hayes noticed subtle tells. The tightening of his fists. Something dangerous in his eyes when he spoke Sophia's name. As the investigation deepened, Hayes and her team uncovered a trail of evidence. Cell phone records placed Richard in the vicinity of the rural road on the night of the incident, contradicting his claim of being home. Financial records showed a large unexplained withdrawal shortly before the event. The major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A minor criminal, arrested in an unrelated case, offered information for a reduced sentence. He described overhearing a bar conversation about a contract against a younger woman, taken out by a wealthy man. His description of the alleged professional matched Nathan Cross, a figure known to authorities but never linked to specific crimes. With this lead, Hayes intensified her focus. She traced Cross's background and movements around the time of Sophia's accident. Security footage from a gas station captured an SUV matching Cross's vehicle near the accident site. As evidence converged, Hayes felt the familiar rush of a case coming together. But she knew proving the connection between a notorious fixer, a prominent businessman, and the critically injured woman would require more than circumstantial evidence. She needed definitive proof. And, critically, she needed Sophia to wake up and tell her story. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after the accident when Sophia Bennett finally regained consciousness. Detective Lauren Hayes was at her bedside within hours, gently drawing out the young woman's memories of that critical evening. Sophia's account provided the missing piece. She remembered the black SUV following her, the intentional impact that sent her car off the road. With Sophia's testimony, Hayes moved decisively. A warrant was issued for Nathan Cross's arrest. Officers detained him at a remote cabin. Under intensive questioning, Cross broke, revealing the details of his arrangement with Richard Thornton. His confession led to a search of Richard's estate. Hidden in a concealed safe, investigators found damning evidence. Detailed maps of Sophia's route on the night of the incident. Communications with Cross. Financial records documenting payment for the crime. Richard Thornton was arrested and charged with attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The trial captivated Seattle. The story of a powerful executive who tried to have his former companion killed shocked the community. Richard's attorneys attempted various defenses, but the evidence was overwhelming. Cross's testimony, Sophia's account, the documented planning, all of it painted an undeniable picture. Richard Thornton was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Nathan Cross, in exchange for his cooperation, received a reduced sentence of 25 years. For Sophia, the road to recovery was long and painful. Physical injuries healed faster than emotional scars. The trauma of the attack, the betrayal by someone she trusted, the knowledge of how close she'd come to death, all of it required time and support to process. Daniel stood by her throughout, offering the kind of partnership built on genuine care rather than transaction. Slowly, Sophia rebuilt her life. She launched her event planning business, this time on her own terms, without anyone's shadow hanging over her success. The case of Richard Thornton serves as a stark reminder of how possession can be mistaken for love, and how control can corrupt completely. A man who'd built an empire through determination and strategy used those same qualities to plot the destruction of a young woman whose only crime was wanting freedom. Sophia's survival wasn't just physical. It was a triumph of will over circumstance, of autonomy over control. Her story reminds us that real relationships are built on equality and respect, not on power and transaction. And it shows us that sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one who refuses to let you go. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the nature of control and independence, subscribe to Crime Canvas. We bring you real cases that illuminate the darkness and the light in human nature. Justice was served in this case, but the scars remain. For Sophia Bennett, every day is a reminder that freedom, even when it comes at tremendous cost, is worth fighting for. Thank you for watching Crime Canvas.